In the 1960s, African countries began to be granted independence by their colonial masters, but the struggle for the true liberation of the continent had only just begun and has continued to this day, with many of vice still holding Africans prisoners, not least of all unproductive mentalities. As a first step towards that liberation, the Organization of African Unity was born in 1963.
Our enemies are many, and they stand ready to pounce upon and exploit our very weakness. They tell us that this particular person or that particular country has greater or more favorable potentialities than the other. They do not tell us that we should unite, that we are all as good as we are able to make ourselves once we are free. In a united Africa, there could be no frontier claims between Ethiopia and Somalia, or between Zanzibar and Kenya, Guinea or Liberia, or between Ghana, Togoland and the Ivory Coast. Because
political experts and veterans today agree that the continent's former colonial masters continued to meddle in African affairs, hindering all unity efforts. And 50 years after independence had first been granted, 26 African countries had seen more than 65 coups d'etats. However, not all of Africa's wars can be blamed on those powers. The people who first came up with that idea were leaders and the elite who had an education, but most of those people had been put in positions of authority by the very foreign powers who did not want to see Africans unite. Most of those officials and elites, therefore, served the foreigners more than they served their own people. Even now that is the case in many places, and people have forgotten that Africa belongs to Africans, and most of the people in Africa are the youth. Efforts today, however, by some African leaders have begun to turn the tide. Rwanda took the first step, became the first to open up her borders and allow all Africans to come and apply for a visa just before they enter the country, upon arrival on the border or at the airport. That spurred another 10 countries to move in that direction, passing laws and introducing policies to that end. You know that an African passport now exists, and all that shows that African unity is not something for just leaders, but all Africans. Understand that strength must be consolidated so that such things that have taken so long to be achieved can be accelerated. Ambassador Joseph Sengimana is not the only one who believes that things are changing. When you compare His Excellency the President of the Republic to people like Nyerere and others I mentioned, remember that in the 50s he was just 5 or 6 years old, but now he is implementing those things. Who thought that Africa's leaders would gather at the Kigali Convention Center to sign an African Continental Free Trade Area agreement? When you look back to the 1950s, before the first African countries began to get their independence, women were oppressed. Today I see something extraordinary that has been achieved, even if it is not in all countries. But let us start with our own country of Rwanda, and I must thank His Excellency Paul Kagame for taking the initiative to give us a voice and place in society. Indeed, the Africa We Want initiative, as part of the 2063 agenda of the continent, has a special place for the youth and women when it comes to development. Back in 2014, when Rwanda marked the 20th anniversary of our own liberation, the country's head of state had this message for Africa's youth.
Liberation is as relevant today as it has ever been. Every generation has a contribution to make, building on the efforts of the earlier one. The founders of our countries struggled to free us from colonial rule, restoring a measure of sovereignty and national pride. But along the way, mistakes have been made, and we still find ourselves far from realizing our potential to propel Africa's future.
Today, the African Union exists in the place of the Organization of African Unity, and Africa Day is celebrated on the 25th of May each year, the day that first organization was founded back in 1963.